At the grand Christmas party, with the chandeliers glittering above and the scent of cinnamon and mulled wine swirling through the mansion, my son Clarence wrapped his arm around my shoulders. His tuxedo shone as if it had been polished by money itself. He pulled me close and said loudly enough for the room to hear, "Dad, I hope you're enjoying the little help I send you every month. $8,000 should keep you comfortable, right?" The room chuckled politely. His wife Maribel smiled smugly, as though she had personally plucked the dollars from the heavens. My hands trembled on the stem of my wine glass. $8,000. They said it as if it were an allowance for a child. But the truth clawed at me. I worked 60 hours a week, juggling 3 jobs just to pay my bills. I wasn't living on their charity. I was surviving on my own sweat. I cleared my throat. "Clarence," I said, my voice firmer than I felt, "I haven't touched a penny of your so-called allowance. I earn my own way. 60 hours a week, 3 jobs. Don't speak as though I'm living off you." The laughter in the room froze. Someone dropped a fork onto a plate. Maribel's face turned pale, as though someone had unplugged her smile. For a heartbeat, even Clarence seemed stunned. Then his grip on my shoulder slackened, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not embarrassment, not anger, but fear. I thought the silence would crush me. Instead, it lifted me. For the first time in years, I stood taller than my billionaire son. But that was only the spark. What came next would set fire to the entire family gathering, and no one could put it out. I could feel the polished oak of the dining table pressing against my thigh as the silence thickened. It was the kind of silence you could butter and spread on toast. I stared at my son, my billionaire son, who had just tried to parade me like some pet project of his generosity. I wanted to believe he had misspoken, that perhaps the champagne had clouded his judgment. But when Maribel leaned forward, her diamond necklace catching the light, I saw the truth glimmering in her eyes. "So you mean to tell us, Harold," she said, her voice sugary with disdain, "that you are still working? At your age?" I set down my fork with care, as though it were a weapon I might accidentally brandish. "Yes," I answered. "I mop floors at the hardware store in the mornings. I stack shelves at the grocery in the afternoons. And at night I tend bar at McKellen's pub. 60 hours a week." Someone across the table coughed awkwardly. Clarence's younger cousin Reginald, who'd had too much eggnog and wore a Christmas sweater with a moose that looked like it had arthritis, blurted, "Well, at least you've got free peanuts at the pub." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, though Maribel's lips pursed tighter than a miser's purse. Inside me, something both bitter and warm began to stir. For years I had bent my back, not only at work, but at home, to keep appearances. Clarence had grown up never knowing what it meant to want. His college was paid for with the savings I had built brick by brick, dollar by dollar, while repairing cars in a drafty garage. His first suit had been sewn by his grandmother's calloused fingers, not by Armani. And now he stood here, a man of unimaginable wealth, trying to frame me as some dependent, a beggar clinging to his coattails. I leaned back in my chair and let my gaze sweep the room. The garland over the fireplace glowed with tiny golden bulbs. The tree in the corner was so tall it nearly grazed the ceiling beams, with ornaments that probably cost more than my entire year's wages. "Do you know what it feels like," I said slowly, "to come home with aching knees? To sit in a kitchen where the only sound is the fridge humming, and to know that while your body is breaking, your son believes he is the one keeping you alive with scraps from his table?" Clarence shifted uncomfortably. His hand tightened around his champagne flute until his knuckles whitened. "I never asked for a penny," I added, my voice rising now, strong and raw. "Never." At the far end, old Aunt Bernice muttered, "Well, if anyone's handing out $8,000 a month, I'll take it. My bingo nights could use a sponsor." That broke the room again. Even I chuckled, though my chest still burned. Clarence opened his mouth, then closed it. His billionaire tongue seemed suddenly poor with words. For the first time I saw him as something less than invincible. A boy cornered, and then Maribel's face hardened into a mask. She whispered something into his ear, quick and sharp, like a knife being sharpened. He flinched, and I knew the battle wasn't over. What Maribel said to Clarence that night would spark a storm that would not only test my pride, but tear apart everything they thought they controlled. I watched Maribel lean in and whisper into Clarence's ear. Her manicured hand rested on his arm like a hawk perched on its prey. Whatever she said, it cut him. His jaw tightened, and he refused to meet my eyes. The chatter at the table resumed in thin, nervous threads. Knives clinked against porcelain, glasses chimed. But underneath it all was the faint echo of what had just been exposed. The billionaire's father still mopping floors. I picked at my roast turkey, though it might as well have been cardboard. My hands were trembling, not with weakness, but with the kind of anger that seeps into your bones. Then Clarence raised his glass. "Everyone," he said too loudly, "a toast to family, to the support we give each other." I nearly choked on my cranberry sauce. The hypocrisy dripped from his words like grease from an overcooked ham. And then came Maribel's voice, sweet, poisonous. "Yes, some of us are fortunate enough to carry the weight for others." "The weight?" My fork clattered onto the plate. "The only weight you carry, Maribel," I muttered, "is that necklace. Looks heavy enough to fund a hospital wing." Uncle Chester, already half-drunk and rosy-cheeked, slapped the table with a laugh. "Ha! Finally someone says it." His laughter rolled through the room, loosening the tension for a brief, absurd moment. But Clarence didn't laugh. His face darkened, and I saw the pride of a man who had built empires suddenly reduced to the fragile ego of a boy caught in a lie. Inside, my thoughts wrestled like two old dogs. One voice said, "Keep quiet, Harold, let it go. Don't ruin Christmas." But another, the voice of every back-breaking shift, every lonely night, every dollar scraped together to put shoes on that boy's feet, roared back, "No, they need to know the truth." I set my napkin down and looked around the long table. Do you want to know what it really means to support someone? When Clarence was in college, I sold my truck, the only vehicle I owned, so he wouldn't drop out. I walked 5 miles to work every morning that winter, through snow up to my knees. That's support. That's sacrifice. The air seemed to vanish from the room. My grandson, a skinny teenager more interested in his phone than the dinner, finally looked up. His eyes were wide, like he'd just discovered Santa was a fraud. Clarence's lips parted, but no words came. Maribel's smile flickered, brittle as glass. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: dignity. Then Aunt Bernice, bless her irreverent soul, raised her glass and said, "Well, Harold, at least walking to work kept you fit enough to dance at all our funerals. You'll outlive us all." The whole table cracked into uneasy laughter. Even I had to smile. Sometimes, the absurdity was the only thing keeping us from crying. But deep down, I knew laughter wouldn't protect me for long. Maribel's glare promised trouble, and I had just invited the storm. And sure enough, by the end of that night, I learned just how far my son and his wife were willing to go to keep their version of the story alive. After the toast and the brittle laughter faded, the evening limped forward like an injured horse. The music played, presents were exchanged, but the warmth had gone out of the room. My revelation sat in the center of the party, like a stubborn lump of coal in the middle of the Christmas pudding. Later, as the guests drifted toward the piano room to sing carols, I slipped into the hallway to fetch my coat. My knees ached from sitting so long, and truth be told, I had no stomach left for Silent Night. That's when I heard it. Low voices behind the study door. Clarence and Maribel. I paused, guilty as a schoolboy caught sneaking cookies, but their words froze me in place. He humiliated us. Clarence, Maribel hissed, in front of everyone. If people start thinking he isn't dependent on us, what does that make you look like? Clarence's reply was muffled, tense. He's my father. What am I supposed to do? Cut him off completely? Yes, she snapped. Or at least remind him where he stands. 8,000 a month is nothing compared to what he costs us in reputation if he keeps telling these stories. Imagine the headlines. Billionaire's father still scrubbing toilets. It makes us look cheap. I pressed my hand against the wallpaper, steadying myself. Cheap. That was the word they feared, as though dignity could be purchased by the yard. For a moment I considered barging in, coat in hand, and telling them exactly what I thought. But then I remembered Aunt Bernice dozing in the armchair, her mouth open like a goldfish, and Uncle Chester trying to harmonize with Jingle Bells 3 keys too low. I didn't want to give them another scandal before dessert. So instead, I tiptoed away, my shoes squeaking faintly on the polished floor. Of course, my stealth was ruined when I sneezed halfway down the hall. The dry air had found its way into my nose, and it exploded out of me like a tuba blast. The door creaked open. Maribel's head poked out, her eyes narrowing into suspicion. "Are you eavesdropping, Harold?" I wiped my nose with a tissue and gave her a lopsided grin. "At my age, dear, I don't eavesdrop. I just have good hearing. A curse of old men. We hear what we're not supposed to." Behind her, Clarence stood pale and nervous. His hand twitched like a boy caught with a slingshot in church. "Go enjoy the party, Dad," he said stiffly. "We'll talk later." I nodded and shuffled back toward the piano room, though inside my chest was on fire. They wanted to silence me, to repackage me as some helpless old man they could trot out for sympathy. But the truth was loose now, and I wouldn't be stuffed back into their script. I rejoined the carols just in time for the last chorus of "We Wish You a Merry Christmas." Aunt Bernice clutched my arm and whispered, "If they sing one more verse about figgy pudding, I'll throw myself into the tree." I chuckled, but the weight of what I'd heard pressed on me. I knew the battle had only begun. And when they finally confronted me later that night, I realized their scheme was bigger, crueler, and far more dangerous than I had imagined. The party dwindled by midnight. The cousins bundled into cars. Aunt Bernice left muttering that her dentures had survived another Christmas miracle. And Uncle Chester was carried out still humming Rudolph in the wrong key. When the mansion finally hushed, Clarence asked me to step into his study. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the room was cold. The kind of cold money can't warm. He closed the door gently, as though soft wood could soften hard words. "Dad," he began, "tonight, you embarrassed me." I sank into the leather chair opposite him. "No, Clarence, I told the truth. If the truth embarrasses you, that's not my doing." Maribel glided in like a queen entering her throne room. She perched on the arm of Clarence's chair, diamonds glistening. Her smile sharper than any blade. "Do you realize," she said, "that when you say you mop floors, people don't hear pride in hard work. They hear failure. And failure, Harold, sticks to a family like a bad smell." I leaned forward, my palms resting on my knees. Better a man who scrubs floors with his own 2 hands than one who scrubs his conscience with excuses. Clarence's face flushed. "You think I don't work hard? I built all this." He gestured around at the oak shelves, the Persian rug, the gold-framed paintings. "And you make me look like a spoiled brat." I almost laughed. "Clarence, when you were 16, you couldn't even make toast without burning the house down. Do you remember that?" His lips parted, speechless. Maribel frowned, clearly not amused. "Yes," I went on, unable to stop the chuckle. "Your mother walked in, smoke everywhere, and you were holding that black brick of bread like it was a new invention. You swore it was smoked toast." For a brief second, Clarence's mouth twitched, almost betraying a smile. But Maribel dug her nails into his arm. "Don't let him distract you," she snapped. "This isn't about toast, this is about appearances. If he insists on working those jobs, people will talk. And if people talk, your deals suffer. Do you want shareholders wondering if your own father is destitute?" The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. My chest tightened. They weren't worried about me, or dignity, or respect. They were worried about their image, their brand. I was no longer a father. I was a liability. I stood, slow and steady. "I didn't come here for handouts. I came because it's Christmas. But I'll tell you something, Clarence." My voice grew firmer, steadier, surprising even myself. "You can buy every mansion on this street, but you'll never own integrity. And integrity, son, is what keeps a man warm at night when the world turns its back on him." Maribel scoffed. "Integrity doesn't pay for yachts." I turned to her, my lips curling into a grin. "No, but it sure helps you sleep on a regular bed without rolling off because the thing won't stop rocking." For the first time all evening, Clarence burst into genuine laughter. Maribel's face froze, horrified, as though laughter itself were betrayal. But when the laughter faded, his eyes met mine. There was something there. Uncertainty, maybe even shame. For a moment I wondered if I had reached him. And then Maribel spoke again. "If you won't accept the allowance, Harold, then perhaps it's time we reconsider your place in this family." The fire hissed. My heart thudded. She wasn't threatening money, she was threatening blood. And that night I realized my own family was preparing to erase me like a stain they couldn't wash out. But they didn't know I had one last card to play. I didn't sleep that night. While Clarence and Maribel retreated to their wing of the mansion, I lay awake in the guest room that smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs, staring at the ornate ceiling. Reconsider my place in the family. Those words gnawed at me. I was no longer a father, no longer a grandfather. To them, I was a blotch on their spotless portrait, something to crop out. But here's the thing, an old man learns patience. Patience in lines at the pharmacy. Patience waiting for buses that never come on time. Patience listening to doctors explain cholesterol in words longer than my grocery list. And I had been patient long enough with them. At dawn, while the house was quiet, I shuffled down to the kitchen. The marble counters gleamed like a hospital ward. Even the refrigerator had a gold handle. I opened it, half expecting angelic singing. Instead, I found 10 jars of imported olives, 6 bottles of champagne, and, ironically, no milk. Billionaires, I thought, and not a drop for coffee. I brewed tea instead and sat at the breakfast bar. That's when an idea began to form. My last card, if you will. They thought I was powerless. They thought I depended on their allowance, their mercy, their image. But what they didn't know was that, months earlier, Clarence had asked me to co-sign on a property deed for tax purposes. He had mumbled something about it being just paperwork, and I had agreed, not fully understanding, but trusting. I kept a copy in my old metal filing cabinet back home, under the receipts for every oil change I'd ever had. And now that paper meant something. Something big. I sipped my tea and chuckled to myself. Aunt Bernice had once told me, "Never underestimate an old man with a filing cabinet. That's where the bodies are buried." At the time, I thought she meant it literally. She had a strange sense of humor. But now I understood. By mid-morning, the household was awake, and Maribel floated into the kitchen in a silk robe, looking at me like I was yesterday's leftovers. "You're up early," she said. "Old bladders, dear," I replied. "We don't sleep much when the plumbing's faulty." Clarence stumbled in soon after, hair disheveled, still looking uneasy after last night's confrontation. He avoided my eyes and reached for his coffee. I decided not to press them. Not yet. Timing was everything. Like pouring gravy. Too fast, and it floods the potatoes. Too slow, and it congeals before it reaches the plate. Instead, I made small talk. Asked Clarence if he remembered the old baseball mitt he'd left in my garage when he was 10. He mumbled something about not having time for baseball anymore. Maribel rolled her eyes as though sports were a disease. But inside, I was smiling. Because I knew, they thought the game was over. They thought they'd written me off. But they didn't realize I was still holding the ball. Hook. And by the time Christmas morning dawned, I was ready to show them that this old man was not a liability, but a storm they'd never seen coming. The mansion buzzed with Christmas morning rituals. Maids shuffling trays of pastries. Clarence's children tearing into presents so expensive they'd need insurance. And Maribel directing the chaos like a general on a battlefield. I sat quietly in the corner, clutching my mug of tea, letting the paper rip and laughter fill the air. It could almost have felt normal. Family, warmth, celebration, if not for the invisible noose tightening around my neck. Their whispers from last night clung to me like smoke. When the children finally squealed over a diamond-studded drone, yes, diamond-studded, Clarence stood before the tree, tall and proud. "And now," he announced, "a final gift for Father, a small token of our gratitude." He gestured toward Maribel, who handed me a velvet box with a smirk. Inside was a platinum watch, worth more than every paycheck I'd ever earned combined. "Consider it," Maribel said, "an acknowledgement of how much we support you." I snapped the box shut and set it gently on the table. "Beautiful," I said, "but useless to me. I can't tell time when I'm scrubbing toilets. The gloves fog my glasses." A laugh bubbled out of one of the grandkids, quickly smothered by Maribel's glare. Clarence's smile waddarded. That was my moment. I cleared my throat, my voice carrying over the room. "Since we're exchanging gifts, I've brought one too." From my worn leather satchel, I pulled out a folded envelope. The paper was creased, the ink faded, but it was intact. I laid it on the coffee table between us. Clarence frowned. "What's this?" "Remember, son, when you asked me to co-sign some property paperwork? Said it was just a formality? Well, turns out my name isn't just on the bottom line. It's on the deed itself." The room froze. The children stopped mid-play, sensing drama like wolves scenting blood. Maribel's face drained of color. "That's impossible." I smiled thinly. "Not impossible, just overlooked. See, in your haste to use me as a pawn, you gave me a queen. That property, what is it, 20 acres near the coast, is half mine." Clarence's hand twitched, reaching for the paper, but I slid it back into my satchel. No, not yet. You see, I've kept quiet for years. Never asked for anything. But after last night, after hearing you talk about my place in the family, I think it's time to remind you I'm not just baggage you can toss aside." The silence stretched. Then, from the far end of the sofa, Aunt Bernice piped up with a wheeze. "Well, Harold, if you don't want the land, I'll take it. I've always wanted to run a llama farm." The room broke into startled laughter, though Maribel looked ready to faint. Clarence pressed his fingers to his temples. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Oh, but I would," I said softly. "And I will, unless you learn to show me the respect I deserve. I don't need your allowance. I don't need your charity. But I'll be damned if I let you parade me around as your dependent while plotting to erase me." For the first time, Clarence looked small in his own mansion. His empire couldn't shield him from the one thing he had underestimated: the memory and resolve of his father. I leaned back, sipping my tea. "Merry Christmas, son." And in that fragile silence, I realized the final move was mine. But what I did next would decide whether I left them broken, or finally taught them what family truly meant. The velvet watch lay untouched on the coffee table. The children had gone back to their toys, but their giggles sounded thinner, uncertain. Clarence sat slumped in his chair, staring at me as though I'd just shifted the ground beneath his mansion. Maribel's face was pale and pinched, the diamonds at her throat suddenly looking like chains. I spoke slowly, each word measured. Clarence, I didn't come here to embarrass you. I came to share Christmas with my family. But when you tried to make me into some dependent puppet for your image, I had to speak. Because I won't let you, my own son, rewrite who I am. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His shoulders sagged, the arrogance stripped away. I scrub floors, I stock shelves, I pour drinks for strangers, I went on. And I'll keep doing it, because honest work doesn't shame me. What shames me is the thought that I raised a man who can't see dignity in it. The fire popped, throwing sparks. For the first time, Clarence didn't argue. He only bowed his head, the weight of my words pressing harder than any boardroom deal. Maribel tried to recover, her voice sharp. So what, Harold? You'll hold that deed over us like blackmail? I shook my head. No, Maribel. I'll hold it as proof that you don't control everything. Proof that respect goes both ways. And if I have to use it to remind you, then yes, I will. But what I want is something money can't buy. I want my son to look at me and see not a burden, not a liability, but his father. Silence, heavy, unbroken. Then Clarence whispered, almost too low to hear, I forgot. I forgot what you did for me. Something in my chest softened. Perhaps it was too late, perhaps not. But hearing those words was worth more than the watch, the mansion, the diamonds. I stood, taking my coat. I'll leave you to your Christmas morning. I have my shift at the pub tonight. Old Gus can't pull pints without me. I smiled faintly. Besides, Aunt Bernice needs a ride to bingo. That finally cracked the tension. Even Maribel let out an unwilling laugh, sharp and bitter, but laughter nonetheless. At the door, Clarence hurried after me. Dad, keep the deed. Just don't sell it. Not yet. I patted his shoulder. That depends on you, son. You want me to stay your father? Then treat me like one. When I stepped out into the cold winter air, the snow crunched beneath my boots. The mansion loomed behind me, glittering with lights. But I didn't feel small against it anymore. I walked toward my old car, parked crooked among the luxury sedans. She coughed to life with a roar that would make a mechanic cry. I laughed to myself, shaking my head. Still runs better than Clarence's yacht, I bet. As I drove home, the road stretched quiet and long. My body was tired, yes, but my spirit felt lighter than it had in years. I hadn't just reminded my son of who I was, I had reminded myself. And that was the best Christmas gift I could have asked for.